Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Ferlataro. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you my favorite seasonal decks for the Northern Hemisphere and also for the Southern Hemisphere. So we're going to start with the Northern Hemisphere simply because I was born in the Northern Hemisphere, but it's also because I think that when you go from winter towards spring, the change is definitely stronger in the air. You can definitely feel it a bit more rather than now in the Southern Hemisphere, which we're supposed to be going from the heat of summer towards milder temperatures of autumn, fall. And as a matter of fact, we have been in autumn. We entered autumn on the 1st of March here in the south. But let me tell you, in Sydney, the weather is a bit all over the place because we're still having days with 31 degrees Celsius, followed by days in which we barely get to 20. So it is a little bit all over the place, but it is something that we're getting used to. And it doesn't mean that we don't have that kind of craving for the colder, the milder kind of temperatures and everything that is related to that. So when it comes to decks, for example, I'm actually feeling attracted more by decks that reflect the autumn energy. But as I said, let's start with the Northern Hemisphere because you guys are lucky. You're going towards spring and then it will be summer. And you know, in spring you always want to shed everything that really weighs you down. So that metaphorical weight that we carry with us, that burden. And we want to start doing things, we want to get into projects, we want to get into the spirit of the season. And I've got a selection of decks out of my collection that I think that really speaks of these kind of vibes. So I'm going to start with, there's a bit of a mix between Oracle decks and Tarot decks, and there's also a mix between indie, the independently produced decks, and mass market decks. Because I understand that you know, indie decks are rather expensive and it's very nice to be able to choose a deck that is very affordable, as in a mass market deck, to experience the same kind of adventure that you can experience with an indie deck. So I'm just going to start with an Oracle deck, and it is a mass market deck. It is published by Rockpool and it's called the Magical Spirit Oracle, The Brilliance of You by Alexis Racon. Let me just zoom in because it is on the smaller size. So this deck is everything that is related to spring to me, and that kind of spirit about being the pioneer, going out there. You know, if you're doing the deck and walk, you will know what the energy of the Two of Wands is. Always about breaking the chains that tie you down to something that is static and sometimes even sterile, and it doesn't want to move. So this deck, even though the colors, this coffee color or cappuccino, I think it's more like a cappuccino kind of color, especially when you look at the borders. Would probably suggest something more of an autumn kind of feel, but I can assure you 100% this deck is a Two of Wands energy. This is the breaking from the laws, breaking from the chains that tie us down and starting something new. It's the moment in which you realize that you're not an individual anymore. You realize the presence of the others. You look back at your world, everything you've got, and you see, surprised that it actually fits into the palm of your hand. And therefore, you need to outgrow that kind of feeling. You need to break out of those kind of barriers and boundaries and branch out into the world. And that's all about the Two of Wands for Aries 1. Again, if you're doing the deck and walk, by the way, I am doing the deck and walk and I'm going to share it both with my subscribers, and we're doing a deeper kind of work with my members as well. So if you want to join us, you'll be more than welcome. So this deck is absolutely a deck that really tells you just get out of your own self, you know, get over that kind of burden that you have been carrying with you for the length of winter. And it's a really, really beautiful deck as well. You can use it by itself because it is very complex, and when it comes to the aesthetics, it's very whole, I would say. But I do have a tarot deck that I actually like to pair with this deck. And it's this one here. It's the Cozy Witch Tarot deck by Amanda Lovelace. The artwork is by Janina Medeiros. And I really think that it's one of the decks that actually pair up the best with this Oracle deck, which is not an easy one to find a pair for. Let's just do 2 cards because I'm staying with the zoomed in view. So this is really, this deck, these 2 decks together are really amazing. There is this kind of communication. What I love to do is focus, for example, on both messages, because I don't know if you can see, but here at the bottom of the Cozy Witch Tarot, you do have a message. You know, even other than the title of the card. So we got in display, in this case, we have the 7 of Pentacles with nurture what you have and see how it grows and grows. And so if we pair it up with the Oracle deck, we got the Lover, Aphrodite, Passion, Abundance, which is very much a spring related concept. And it also does have a message within the card, and it says it is safe to surrender to the good feelings. And I really appreciate that because it really puts a positive spin to a card which is, generally speaking, rather neutral, like the 7 of Pentacles. So the way I read the 7 of Pentacles is that kind of energy that you still have to be producing things. However, you kind of need to stop for a second and evaluate and assess whether you're going down the right path or not. So this card is telling you it's okay, you are, so you can actually move on from that, and sequentially you can focus on the 8 of Pentacles, for example. But also we've got, for example, here, blessings and curses, psyche, self-love, beauty. Do not be ashamed, not of your thorns or of your flowers, with the 4 of Swords. And I really like this way in which the Oracle is asking me to look at the 4 of Swords. The 4 of Swords is the card in which you have to rest because you come out of a situation of really intense mental pain, like the 3 of Swords. And so you're just over it and you need to reset. You absolutely need to recuperate your energies. And so this one tells you, don't let go of all of the feelings of shame of the 3 that can come with the 3 of Swords. Let go of all of that and appreciate this moment, because this moment in time is when you do finally find some rest. The Seeker with could you surrender just a bit more? And this is really beautiful with the Ace of Wands, because the Ace of Wands, you know, that everything, I read everything as cyclical. So it's not just that we completed a cycle and we just stay where we are. We always need to look ahead and plan for starting again in our journey. And so, for example, the Ace of Wands is that mark in the wheel of things that tells you that yes, you have completed one turn of the wheel, but you have to prepare yourself to go ahead. And the energy of the Ace of Wands is exactly that, because it gives you the possibility to make treasure of the experiences that you had on the previous journey and start something again, like a different person, like a new person. But it also tells you when you're shedding the burden of the previous journey, can you surrender just a bit more, perhaps, to the energy of starting something new? So that's how you identify the Seeker in the Ace of Wands. And so the emotions with the Hermit, for example, the spirit of the tree, nature, the priestess, or inner peace with the 6 of Cups. Perhaps that's exactly what you need, and that's why you're taking refuge in the memories of a past that didn't have any complications or any worry with the 6 of Cups. Memento Mori with the 9 of Cups. Absolutely, let's remind ourselves that where is the meaning? The meaning is in the middle. So when the 9 of Cups appears and it tells you that you have your wish come true, ask yourself or remind yourself that you need to share that with the community, because you're not just one isolated self, but you're part of a community. So the meaning of this wish come true is in the middle. So share that, keep something for yourself, but share something of that with the others as well, and that will make it more whole. The harmony of finding the harmony in the Two of Swords is that kind of situation in which you don't even have the necessary information to take a decision. So as you can see, these two, apart from the fact that they do share a similar, if I'm not going to say the same kind of artwork because it's not the same, but it's a very similar one. And when it comes to the color palette, in many cards, you do have the resonance of these kind of muted tones, and also, you know, that kind of a cappuccino kind of tones that I do find it in the Cozy Witch Tarot deck as well. So definitely these two together, or just the magical spirit alone, really give me the idea of that sense of spring that you're going to go through if you live in the Northern Hemisphere. And now let's move on to the Southern Hemisphere, because the Southern Hemisphere is going through the opposite process. So we're basically leaving behind those vibes related to summer. So the energy of summer, which is at the end of its cycle. And so you can definitely feel that kind of going past the expiry date and progressing into that kind of maturity that sometimes is also related to rotting, but it's a good rotting, it's a natural rotting, it's part of life. So we go through that kind of cycle because we need to, in a way, it's also a kind of shedding. It's not the shedding to prepare ourselves for a new journey like when spring comes, but it's a kind of shedding to prepare ourselves to a more introspective kind of voyage. And I do have the feel coming from this deck related to that. So it's the Mystic Palette Tarot by Ciro Marchetti. This is the indie edition, but the mass market edition of the muted, so this is the muted edition, and the mass market edition is coming out, I believe, on the 8th of April. Mind you, it may depend on the country you're in, so obviously make sure that you check that out, but it is definitely planned and it's definitely going ahead. We have seen the Mystic Palette Tarot, the full color edition, which has already been released in the mass market edition, and this one is following suit. I have actually seen the mass market edition in some YouTube channels already, and I don't know whether these tarot YouTubers have been gifted, or you know, they have had probably early access to the release. In Australia, in any case, it's not going to be released until the 8th of April, but we're always a bit behind the rest of the world. So this is the indie edition. I am so happy that I got this. One of my members actually contacted me after watching one of my videos when I was talking about the full color edition, and she said, look, I really think that you will like the indie edition. And so she was so very kind, and she you know, she passed it on to me. And I have to say she was completely right, because this deck is absolutely fantastic. I love the cardstock, I love the way it feels in my hands, so that would probably relate back to the fact that it's actually very, I'm not going to say very thick, because it feels like I'm saying that it's too thick. It is thick enough to be one of those decks that it feels like you can use it over and over again and it's not going to let you down. It's very sturdy. It has that kind of feel of autumn to me, you know, falling leaves, and probably it's due to the fact that we do have this kind of a sepia tone to the cards, or at least a muted tone to the cards. I love the Six of Swords because it's a gondola, so obviously coming from Venice, for me this means a lot. It's one of Ciro Marchetti's most articulated decks when it comes to symbolism, and if you know his work, you will understand that, you know, that means a lot, because Ciro Marchetti's decks are always full of symbols. But this one really, I think, you know, when you're seeing a progression in an artist's work, I believe that there's always a turning point where you say, yes, you nailed it. You know, that is the deck. That is the deck that really nailed it. And I thought we had reached that point with the Encore Tarot, which is unfortunately still just in French. I don't know why they don't want to translate that in English, because I think that there'll be a lot of people actually interested. But it's an amazing deck, but I feel that this one, which is actually not a new deck, I think that it's been published back in probably 2020, 2021. So let me just double check, because I don't want to say something wrong. So yes, it is 2021 indeed. So this is the guidebook, and it's common to the full color version and the let's say muted tone version. I am lucky enough that I got this one because of the edition of the full color that I bought is the German edition. Even though I speak in Dutch, I kind of understand German when it's in writing, but it's always best to have a language that you speak with freedom. Let's say that it doesn't necessarily stop you while you're reading something because you have to translate a word that you don't know. So yes, 2021. So it's not a recent deck, but I feel that all of those decks that were produced during the pandemic somehow got overlooked in a way, and finally people are getting back to know these decks, either because they've been, you know, they move from an indie publication to a mass market one, and obviously that brings about a lot of some kind of a revival of the deck themselves. Oh my goodness, look at the puppies, they're so beautiful. But yeah, in some cases I find myself craving one deck or another, and then I look at the publication and it's 2021, 2022. You know, it tells a lot, because there's been a boom in let's say spiritual or spirituality related publications, whether it's about tarot and oracle decks or reading cards in general, but also in books, for example. And I feel that there's recently a shift into magic, even when it comes to let's say fiction books. There's a lot of request and demand for fiction books that are based in, let's say, in a magical kind of settings. So this is definitely an autumn deck for me, and I really enjoy using this right now because we are going towards, so it is officially autumn in Australia, but in Sydney we're still having really warm days. But you know, eventually we will abandon that to go towards more mild temperatures, and I'm really looking forward to that. So the Mystic Palette Tarot, but this is the muted edition, and what I wanted to show you is also the full color edition. In this case it's a mass market one, and I have to zoom out a little bit because it comes in a bigger box. And so the reason why I wanted to show you this one as well is because I believe that the full color version of the Mystic Palette Tarot is actually really apt for the Northern Hemisphere season of spring. So this deck is in full color. It's exactly the same when it comes to the images, and also when it comes to the guidebook, although as I said before, I purchased this. This is a German edition, so obviously it is in German, and so I will definitely use more the English edition. Now I have to say something about the cardstock, because I remember looking at Lisa Pape's video lately about the cardstock of the sorry, I don't remember whether she was talking about the cardstock of the full color edition or the one of the muted edition. It could have been a muted, I'm not entirely sure. In any case, this is a much thinner, I still have the indie edition here. So this is a much thinner cardstock, and let me just compare the two in, they have the same number of cards, so we are actually comparing apples to apples, even though, you know, it might be a red apple and a yellow apple, but they're still apples, so we can still compare them. And let me just show you the difference in height of the two decks when put side by side, and it is astonishing I mean, you see that? It's at least, I would say, 45% thicker, 45 to 50% thicker, the indie edition. So obviously you can see that, you can see it in the cards as well. Now, I have to say though, that this, again, this is the the Urania publication of this mass market deck. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that the English version of the full color may actually come out by Llewellyn. So we may be looking at a completely different cardstock altogether. The only one that I have is this one by Urania, so obviously this is the one I'm going to talk about. But I didn't want to talk about the cardstock, and to me this is still really good. It still feels like it's got a substance to it. So I remember Lisa Papaz was comparing this cardstock to, or the cardstock of the deck she was showing, to the cardstock of the Sacred She Tarot by Madheva Padma, which is a really beautiful deck. And she was saying that it feels really papery. It feels like it's gonna get ruined. It's gonna board probably. I cannot do that comparison again because, as I said, this is a Urania publication, so perhaps it's different. This one feels a lot better. I completely understand what she was referring to, and I can say that this one actually feels better. So I don't know if this is important to you. You may want to do like I did. So I got the indie edition for the muted one, and I got the mass market, the German mass market, for the full color, which means that I can still access the guidebook in English. But when it comes to the cardstock, I actually prefer this one. Sorry, I prefer the indie if I have to be honest between the two of these. But between a thinner edition of this deck and these cards, this cardstock, I actually do enjoy this one a lot. And I also think that the deck she was showing is actually larger in size. So as I said, I'm not entirely sure, but this is what I have, and I can assure you 100% it's a good cardstock. It's not as good as the indie, but it's a good cardstock. This is definitely a spring deck for me, but it's the kind of spring that actually takes you and makes you dream about summer already because of many colors. The color palette is amazing in this deck. Look at the death card, is so gorgeous. I really love what Chiro has done with this deck. It's absolutely amazing. And so this is definitely a spring deck for me, and it does contain those kind of vibes, and it's the late spring kind of vibe, in the sense that it really makes you think about what you want to do this summer, you know, the holiday you want to take, catching up with friends. It's probably a May kind of deck rather than an April kind of deck. But it always depends on where you live, because if you live in the southern part of Europe, April is already charged with that kind of atmosphere. If you live in the northern part of the US, then definitely even in April you still have a snow every now and then. So, you know, it really changes depending on the geographical location. But overall, I would say that this deck is reflecting a lot of those kind of vibes that are embodied in spring. So going back to the Southern Hemisphere and the idea of autumn and that kind of decadence that it brings with it, I could not pass on the Seasons of the Witch article. In this case, obviously the Mabon edition. Mabon was on the 20th of March for us, whereas you guys in the north celebrated Ostara. But I have to say, this deck is embodying that kind of energy in the best of ways. Mabon in the Southern Hemisphere is not necessarily autumn as much as autumn feels in the Northern Hemisphere, if that makes sense at all, because we still tend to have warmer temperatures, but we're going towards these kind of feelings, and I can't wait. I honestly cannot wait. And also this is probably, together with Lita, This is probably my favorite one of the Seasons of the Witch Oracles. I actually also love Samhain a lot, but because Samhain was still one of those decks that had the kind of lyrical or poem format of sentences at the bottom, I don't have that same accessibility that I have with the Maven, and then obviously they followed suit with Imbolc and Lita. They all three of them have messages that are not in a poetic kind of form at the bottom, so they're very accessible for someone like me who is an English speaker but not an English native. I love that we got the Ghost Whisperer, be still in the whispers that ebb and flow through the silence. That is, I was looking at a meme the other day on Facebook and I found it so relatable, and it was, you know, it kind of had a very similar kind of vibe to this one. So it was someone saying, I'm so happy to have found out that the noises I was hearing are actually ghosts and not stuff that I cannot afford to repair. And I thought to myself that it's really funny, but it's actually really spot on for a lot of things and a lot of us. So Harvest Moon, Mountain Cabin, you see this kind of autumn feel. This is absolutely amazing for me. Darkness Falls. I actually crave, you know, darkness coming earlier and earlier during the day. And, you know, if it sounds strange, it's because most of my subscribers and my members are actually in the Northern Hemisphere, which is absolutely fine. But on the other hand, I remind you of what you felt like in October. Didn't you feel like it was the right time for you to actually wind down, you know, accessing the darkness a little bit earlier during the day, and, you know, feeling like you wanted something warm, a warm cup of tea instead of an iced tea? Or, you know, even eating certain kind of sweet food, because perhaps jam, although I believe that jam can actually be enjoyed throughout the whole year, so it's not necessarily just in winter or in autumn in this case. So maple tree, the other day one of our neighbors just gave us an entire jar of homemade honey. It's an acacia honey and it's just absolutely amazing. I would probably just eat it with spoons, you know, and for now I'm just limiting myself in putting it into even my coffee, for example, and my teas. And in the yogurt as well, because, you know, sometimes you have to indulge. This is the kind of right season for indulging into these kind of vibes. Cranberry, absolutely love that. So the cranberry card says, devour the truth and let it sink into the depth of all that came before and all that will come after. I absolutely love this. That is really embodying the spirit of autumn for me, because you're in between seasons. So you're in between the stronger season of, you know, the productive season of summer and the resting season of winter, and it's just so amazing. I really love this deck, and it's definitely one of the decks that I love using this time of the year. And finally, I wanted to show you an indie deck as well, because, well, the Mystic Palette Muted Tone was indie as well, but you do have the mass market edition if you want to. So going back to the Northern Hemisphere, we're actually focusing on those kind of really beautiful vibes given by the Wild Child Oracle cards. Now this is the second edition, or at least it's the second Kickstarter, and I've always had a bit of an issue opening this box. Anyway, so this is the one that, as I said, a very recent Kickstarter, at least from, you know, the end of last year. And you're probably more used to this, seeing this deck with rounded tops and bottoms, because that was the initial publication, the initial release of this deck. It is by the same author as the Healing Waves Tarot, Nawanjuna Siri, but I think that there is also a co-author. Yes, so Nat Afipong Charon, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, so apologies for that. I was always so tempted to buy the previous edition of the Wild Child Oracle, because I really enjoy the images, the color palette, and the also the whole process, because it is just absolutely beautiful. But I did have an issue with the rounded tops and bottoms. I did not purchase the deck, but I thought to myself, you're never going to be able to use it, and you end up not using it and leaving it on the shelf. And that's not what you should do with a deck. If you already have a feeling that you're not going to enjoy it, then don't buy it. So I literally talked myself out of buying this deck. But then when I saw that they came out with this edition, which is a normal standard tarot format and size, I really jumped in immediately because I really love pairing it up with the Healing Waves Tarot. And I'm just going to show you quickly, which is this one here. So I'm sorry to say that this deck, the original version in English is out of print and really hard to find, and it really fetches astronomical prices. I've seen it sold for $500–600, which is ridiculous, but it's not ridiculous because this is an amazing deck. So obviously if you really long for this deck and you can afford it, then of course you will pay that much. I mean, we always say the same, right? I mean, a deck is as valuable as someone is willing to pay for it. But I have to say that there's a French edition of this deck that circulated until a few months ago, and then and it wasn't necessarily mass market. It was a French edition of the deck. It was legitimate for those of you who were wondering whether it was a copy or not. It was absolutely legitimate. It had a different cardstock, not rose petal as this one. And this is one of the very first rose petal decks that they produced. And I have to say, even after a few years that I've got this deck, probably because I don't use it as much, but it is still, you can still actually feel the trouble, let's say, in separating the cards, because they do tend to stick together. But right now I just wanted to show you how beautiful these two are together, because it's, most of the time you would think that pairing up the same decks from the same author is a bit of a cheating. And I would generally agree, in the sense that it doesn't require much of an effort, because it is the same author, and in many cases authors change their art style, but this is not the case. It's exactly the same art style. But why making things complicated? We are right now we're living in what I call transactional seasons. So we need to conserve our energy because of something much bigger that is coming towards us in the main seasons of summer in the Northern Hemisphere and winter in the South. And so I actually like the opportunity of pairing these two together. They're absolutely lovely. They speak to each other, and because of the typical summer spirit of the Healing Waves Tarot, it is kind of, it does transport you into those end of spring months like May, as I was saying, and the beginning of June perhaps as well. Which is, charged up with that kind of feelings of expectation for something to come, something beautiful coming your way. And I really like it. It's a perfect pair for me. It reads like a charm, and it also, it keeps you within a certain realm, a certain kind of theme or atmosphere, if you will. Absolutely love these two together. So as I said, this is the Wild Child Oracle cards, and it's one of the decks that I really feel embodies the energies of spring. And now going back to the Southern Hemisphere. Now, I don't know about you, but when autumn comes, I feel like binge watching TV shows on, the various streaming services. I don't know if it's because, generally speaking, in summer I'm away a lot, and so I don't have access to a TV. Or maybe because, on the other hand, in autumn, as I was saying before, it comes dark sooner, and therefore you're more, you're inside, it's not dinner time yet, and I just finished working and I have like half an hour or an hour before I need to start cooking or start doing something else related to the evening, and so I just enjoy sitting in front of a TV and binge watch a TV show. And so I thought that this deck, which is the Tarot Pop Culture, and let me just zoom out because it is rather large. Now this is a French deck by Bérengère de Moncy. It has been published by Hachette, and this is a mass market deck. I hope so much that they're going to pick this up and release it in English. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. It is an amazing deck. If you like your pop culture, your popular culture related to mostly movies and TV shows, but also books, this deck is for you. Let me tell you, it's absolutely fantastic. I am such a fan of this deck. I love it. Every time I look at it, I just, you know, my heart sings. There's references to Harry Potter with, you see, Hermione, Jumanji, the Sister Halliwells, Dragon Ball, of course, Total Recall. There's so many interesting Hercule Poirot, so many interesting references. The Alethiometer, which is from Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials, which is by far my favorite fantasy trilogy of all times. It's the most amazing adventure-based book. I have books, there's 3 of them that I've ever read. The Thing, you know, from the Addams Family. So there are so many, as you can see, there are so many references, Morticia Addams, to both TV shows and Murray's Kingdom, which was a movie, or Edward Scissorhand. And it is a peepish deck, but yet it's actually really well made. Even the pips are absolutely spot on, you know, and I actually don't mind because they're really well thought through. And we got Paul Atreides with Timothée Chalamet, so it's already, let's say you got a little bit of the 80s and 90s, but you got the 20s as well in here, which I really appreciate, because we've got Sarah Connor as well. That was, I mean, I know that they actually did a TV show based on Terminator where Sarah Connor was the protagonist, but I believe, looking at the way, the features of this character, that they're referring back to the original one, which I think it was from the 80s. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it must have been from the 80s. You know, Cinderella's shoes, of course, the Proton Pack. I just watched the latest Ghostbusters, and okay, no spoilers, so no spoilers, but I love the idea of, you know, these kind of sequels, but I also think that they need to make sure that they don't kind of throw a bad light to the franchise somehow. So One Night Willie from The Goonies, one of the most amazing movies I've ever watched when I was a kid. Sailor Moon. So this deck, the DeLorean from Back to the Future. Sorry, and each and every card, Gandalf, each and every card, I really need to stop myself from, you know, letting myself wander in awe and in nostalgia of all of these movies and TV shows that I used to watch, or I still watch, The Matrix. I absolutely love this deck. It's one of those decks that I cannot stop looking at, and sometimes this means that I actually spend more time looking at the cards and going, oh, rather than actually using it for divination, but I don't mind, because sometimes you need a deck like that. And let me tell you, is 2024 the year of the remakes? Because there's gonna be a Beetlejuice remake, there's gonna be an The Crow remake. You know, well, Dune was a remake, but the first episode from Dune was from 2020, so obviously it's not out of, but we did have Dune 2 coming out. Death Note, by the way, really amazing story. If you haven't watched it, I think it's available on Netflix. It was also from 2-3 years ago. I really love this deck so much. Harry Potter, Sleepy Hollow. I just can't stop talking about this Neo. Hi, Neo. I just can't stop talking about this deck because it's absolutely fantastic, and because it reminds me so much of all of these TV shows and movies, it does have a kind of an autumn feel to it for me, because it really is, it represents that kind of part of the day in which, because it is dark outside, I don't feel like going out for a walk, but I just want to cozy up on the couch with my cats and you know, and a cup of tea or maybe hot chocolate, and just watch an episode of or a movie from some of these references. And going back to the Northern Hemisphere, I wanted to go back also to an indie deck, and this one, unfortunately, it is out of print. So it's the Honasa House 5th edition, and it's I chose this edition because to me the color palette of this edition is even more referring back to spring than the other ones. The other ones, if you're not familiar with these decks, she's released 7 editions so far, and most of the other editions, I only have 4 editions, but most of the other editions are more centered on prune colors like purple, aubergine, you know, eggplant kind of purple colors. And so I do prefer to use those ones in autumn and even winter in some cases. But this one, because we have a predominance of green, it definitely reminds me of spring, and in many cases also of summer. It is also kind of different when it comes to the format, because if you're familiar with the other Honasa Houses decks, they're actually much taller and probably also a little bit thinner. I do appreciate this deck a lot. I think it's got a completely kind of feel to the cards and to the artwork in general because of the difference in color palette. This card, which is the 10 of Pentacles, is an absolute joy to look at because it really reminds me of spring. And it is a botanical kind of deck. Look at the Emperor card, it's so decadent and beautiful. But still, because of the green and the yellows, it makes you feel more like spring rather than autumn. So as I was saying, it is a botanical deck. And by the way, I think that by now, and I apologize, but I haven't had time to actually double check that yet. By the way, this is the Celtic Cross, and I've just been to Ireland a few weeks ago, and I got one, and I really, really love it. As I was saying, I haven't downloaded the guidebook yet. Is it still just about the major, or did Honasa upload the one for the minors as well? Because I'll be very curious to see. I remember that at the beginning she just released the one for the majors, which is, you know, it's great, but I would love to understand the choices and the process behind the production of the minors as well. This is the Hermit card. It's absolutely gorgeous. And imagine this card with a purple tone and see how different that makes it. You know, the vibe of the card are completely different for me. So this is an amazing deck, and I'm so sorry. I hope you're not falling in love with this deck, because as I said, it is indie, but it is unfortunately out of print and not that easy to find either. But that's definitely a deck that I use when spring comes to Australia. So that's the Honasa House 5th edition. And so I started with the Northern Hemisphere, I'm gonna end with the Southern Hemisphere, and a deck that I really love to use when it's this autumn season. And it's a release deck by 3 Trees Tarot, and it's the Oak, Ash and Thorn. By the way, small announcement, so in May, June, 3 Trees Tarot is producing another deck. I don't remember what it's called, but I watched a video in Simon at the Hermit's Cave channel, and he actually presents the deck, and it's absolutely gorgeous, really, really amazing. But that's, you know, that's just housekeeping, communication, that there's going to be a new release. If you like the decks produced by the 3 Trees Tarot, like the Oak, Ash and Thorn, the Smoke, Ash and Ember, the Thimblewood, I think it's called the Thistlewood, sorry, the Thistlewood Oracle deck. And there's going to be a new tarot deck being produced, so that is so gorgeous. So this deck actually came with a few oracle cards as well, so the possibilities card. I'm not sure, I bought it secondhand from a really lovely lady in a Facebook group, so I'm not entirely sure what edition this is, because I know that there have been a couple of editions of this deck, from the Kickstarter to, let's say, a first print to a second print, so I'm not entirely sure. But I just love it. I look at the Temperance card, isn't it just amazing? And this is, you know, regardless of the suit, so obviously you have different suits, of course, but the suit of Pentacles, you know, to me this looks very earthy, but it looks very fall or autumn kind of feel as well. And this is the suit of Cups, and it's got the same kind of feel. And let's see if I can find the other suits as well. Cups and Pentacles, Swords. So this is more wintry for me because of the prevalence of a certain grey and bluish kind of colors, but it's definitely not summery. Again with this, the Four of Swords, but it does, overall it does have that kind of feel of autumn, you know, the vibes of autumn, and I really enjoy using it this time of the year. And I also like to pair it up with a few other autumn, what for me feels like an autumn deck, which is, for example, the Woodland Wardens. I'm just going to quickly show you, even though it is a bit of a cliche kind of pairing, because the two decks have a very similar feel. But sometimes even something that is obvious, you don't have to avoid something obvious. It's you know, when it works, when something works, don't necessarily look for something else just because there's a lot of people doing this kind of pairing, for example. Don't feel like you always have to be original. Sometimes, you know, we need to follow what we like, not necessarily, even if it's something that many other people like. And so these two together, I really love them because they do share that kind of bond that you want a pairing to have. You want your tarot deck and your oracle deck to start talking to each other, almost as if you were not needed. You're just a person that is just flipping the cards. But they have this kind of, the cards themselves have this kind of conversation. You know, the Empress, which is a hare, and the hare and the oak from the Woodland Wardens. Obviously, there is also this sense of directionality, of new opportunities going towards the Empress. That represents, obviously, the sense of creation. So I really enjoy these two together, and to be honest with you, I try pairing the Oak, Ash and Thorn with other decks as well, and there's indeed other decks you can pair it with, like I'm thinking the Earth Angels message cards, for example. Let me see if I got it here. I actually do, so let me just quickly show you what I mean. So this is the Earth Angels message cards, and I originally bought this deck because I wanted to find a really good pair for my tarot landscape. And let me tell you, the artist is Amanda Clark. I've been following her Instagram account for a long time, and she's an absolute genius. The images are absolutely amazing. So let me just put the cards from the tarot back. So in this case, we don't have a perfect match, I don't think, because the color palette of the Earth Angels message cards is slightly different, but the style, the art style is very similar, and we do have a lot of common animals, let's say. In the cards, you see bird with bird, synchronicity with the Seven of Swords, of course. Sometimes you just have to do something that is against your credo, but you find yourself in a position you have to do it. And there is synchronicity in that as well. Release with the Eight of Wands, there is a kind of release of the powerful energy of the Eight of Wands and the speed and the movement. Beltane with Judgment, for example, absolutely. I do associate Beltane with this kind of sense of breaking through the earth, you know, and coming back to life. Room with a View with the Nine of Cups. So as you can see, the Amanda Clark's Earth Angels cards have really eloquent, I would say, keywords, but they also have archetypes, which is very nice. Letting go with the Tower, I mean, how amazing is that? Isn't it such an amazing pair? I really love these two together. It really does bring that feeling of having to, you know, you're just a person that flips the cards, so having to step back and let these two decks communicate and have this conversation, because it really feels like they've been waiting to be put together like this and start talking and confiding in who knows what kind of secrets that they're telling each other. And so I really like when an oracle deck especially gives them the possibility to have an additional insight or a layer of knowledge into a tarot deck because of the way in which they pair up together. So that was it for today. I just hope you enjoyed this kind of, I wanted to make sure that we have a little bit for those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere and those of us who live in the South, because I am very aware, having been living in both, I am very aware of the differences, which are, believe me, they're not subtle, obviously, because the change of season is something that really prepares us for a different kind of work that we're doing on ourselves as well. So as I was saying, there's more action in the North and there's more introspection in the South. And so I believe that the reason why we have so many decks, the reason why I'm a tarot collector, is because I can reach out and find a deck for each and every one of the needs that arise from sometimes even the change of season. But let me know if you, for example, if you use different decks in the North or different decks in the South. Let me know what you use in these kind of seasons, because I'm always interested, you know, to hear what your favorite decks are. Thanks so much for staying with me till the end of this video. More to come. Have a great day.